When we hear the term nuclear energy, what comes to mind? Most of us would think of flying cars and cars that run on some crazy, fancy energy that comes from nowhere. Now, there is something called nuclear energy that we can use today. It is a readily available product that most people don't really see as much as they do in other states. So, right now, nuclear energy is described in two different processes. We would have a process called nuclear fission, which would come from them splitting one element, normally uranium-235, and producing two energy molecules. But there's also another process which isn't as unattainable as fission. Fission is not as used as much. Fusion would consist of two elements, usually uranium-235, that would produce one energy molecule. Now, what would be better? Obviously, we're spending two elements versus one element. So when we get to fission, we'll have a better payload. So there's three benefits of nuclear energy, and they're pretty clear. Number one would be it would limit our use of fossil fuels. Fossil fuels are basically elements that renew slowly or not at all. They mostly are coal and petroleum, which would produce a small amount of energy versus nuclear energy. Now, Nuclear Industry Association would describe, and they have tested, that a 1-inch long pellet of uranium-235 produces the amount of energy as 1 metric ton of coal. That's a big difference. Nuclear energy just has the potential to produce a lot more energy than most other ways we would attain it. So is it cheaper in the long run? Yes, it's cheaper in the long run. A nuclear plant costs almost twice as much as a fossil fuel plant would essentially cost. So they produce more energy and have a lower operating cost down the line. Operation costs could fluctuate in a fossil fuel plant. The price of coal could go up, and that could affect how much energy is produced. Nuclear energy doesn't affect that way. Their only differentiating cost is the cost of operation and how much it would cost to build the plant. Is it worth it? Nuclear energy is something that can be sustained easily and requires little to no maintenance. So, is it better for our environment? Our environment is slipping away, and that's just something that we have to learn to deal with and change now. Our reluctance on fossil fuels are making our environment worse by the day. Is nuclear energy better? If we switch to nuclear energy, it would produce our greenhouse gases to about half of what they are now. Uranium isn't the only fuel source that can be used in this process. They also have discovered, according to energyinformative.org, an element called thorium. Thorium operates the same as uranium does. You would just replace it for each element and produce the same amount of energy. But thorium is a way greener element, although uranium is already a greener element. Now there is some negatives. Negative would be that it produces radioactive waste. Radioactive wastes are something that we'd have to store underground or send to a facility that keeps it far away from the population. With radioactive waste, it reduces itself every few years until it becomes a waste that isn't radioactive anymore. But we have to find enough storage to go along with it till that point comes. So I have discussed three major benefits of how nuclear energy is formed and used, and why it should be used more and more widely. It's cheaper in the long run, it's better for environment, and it helps with our reliance on fossil fuels. Although it seems like a small thing to worry about now, our environment is changing by the day. We are losing trees, we're losing land, and we're gaining more factories that produce more greenhouse gases. But if we don't change it now, it might be too late, and our generations to come afterwards wouldn't have an ecosystem to rely on.